Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Lesson Podcast. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I train people for improved personal and professional development, offering my assistance to those ready to develop their goals into tangible, focused, and achievable plans of action. And this podcast is one of the tools I use to accomplish my mission. Generally, when the timer hits 9 minutes and 59 seconds on this recording, you'll have a fully developed life lesson that you can take with you and begin to implement immediately. And if this week's lesson has a ring of familiar, then it's probably a reinforcement of a life change you've already started to implement. This podcast falls under the umbrella of my greater personal development efforts, all under the Your Better You brand. For more information on accountability coaching or to gain access to tools, tricks, and life hacks, visit yourbetteryou.info. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Now, here is this week's life lesson. Order from chaos. That is what we promise our children when we teach them the ways of the world. We teach them that rules are meant to be followed, although at some point some rules that don't make sense are meant to be bent or broken. We teach them that they have the power to be pretty much anything they want to be, as long as they are equipped for the right journey and prepare for the hardships to take along the way. But there's a problem with that mindset in that it's not exactly true. You can't be anything you want to be based on just the fact that you want to be it. Obviously there are the limitations that you actually have, but there are also things in life that will get in the way that you may not be able to overcome. We try to instill in our children plenty so they can get through the hard times, the harshness, and the feedback and sometimes blowback from what they're trying to do. But there is one thing that is actually universal in the thought process, and that is the fact that most of what you're doing is improvisation. The ability to work on a dime, just maneuver as things happen, is what really makes you successful in life. It's not having a grand plan or even having all the steps ready to go with all the resources that are ready for each available step. It's your ability to pivot when something changes. Most of life is improvised. Most of what you're going to do is based on change, and most of what you actually figure out to do is made up as you go along. You start off with a plan. Yes, you always start off with a plan of action, a way forward, a way to begin your deal, and you always start off with a goal, someplace that you want to get to. But in most cases, if you hit that goal, hit the exact goal that you're shooting for, there were plenty of detours along the way to take you way off course or shift you a bit so you pick up extra things or lose things that you thought you were taking along the way before you got there. Or those detours took you off course completely and you ended up close to where you were going, but not exactly where it was. You were going to San Francisco, and instead you ended up going west. And yes, sometimes those detours take you completely off course, completely someplace different, the exact reversal of what you thought you wanted, because once you started going down that road, you realized it was not for you. Whether the barriers are just way too much or way too strenuous or just kind of dumb sometimes. Sometimes we get an idea in our heads that we think is great, and then once we get started, we find out we don't really like that. It's an idea left over from bits and pieces from our parents who try to teach us the ways of the world and how to navigate things, which is great. They're supposed to teach us the way of the world and navigate things. I'm supposed to teach my children the ways of the world and how to navigate things. But I also have to give them the benefit of the doubt that once they take that journey, they can take the knowledge that I've instilled in them, the things I've taught them, I've drilled into them, and they can figure out for themselves what's going to work in what situation, what's not going to work in what situation. And that they are smart enough to figure out that maybe I'm not exactly on top of every single thing, and I may know a lot of stuff, but I don't know everything. And once they get out in the real world, they'll figure out that there's some things that they'll have to learn on their own, some lessons I've set them up for, but some lessons I can't actually teach them. This knowledge should be in no way a surprise. This should be fairly obvious, but it gets lost. Actually, it's mostly hidden in good intentions, hidden in the thought process of protecting those that you're teaching, hidden from the people who need to know it most when they can take it or understand it early on as opposed to being exposed to them at the very last moment when it may be a bit of a struggle, a bit of a heartache to take on. The real issue is that none of us really have a good plan. We have a plan, we have an idea, we have a direction we're working towards, and we have sets of skills to help us navigate that plan. But none of us have a foolproof plan unless we're literally following behind the footsteps of someone else and watching them take every move before us. Every stumble that they do, we can see and avoid it as it comes along. And even a plan like that comes with a risk where you may not have the exact skill, the exact knowledge, the exact ability to get past the stumble exactly the way they did. And then you're back to where you were at the beginning, square one, figuring out on your own, being your own person with your own thought processes and your own processes in general to try to make something work. How do you get past this? Well, you just come up to the conclusion that there's no getting past this. We're all winging it. We're all working our best to improvise. None of it is actually scripted, and that we all must do what we have to in the right moments to make things work. And sometimes the right moments aren't going to work. And sometimes the wrong moments will actually work better than the right moments. You're going to just go through life and figure out that things are not working towards you, and you're going to find a way to get around it. You may avoid it altogether and give it up. You may sit there and just watch it work itself through. You may try a detour. You might try to back up and go around it, go over it, try to some way to barrel through it if possible. But you're going to come against struggles, come against strife, come against bits and pieces in your life that are going to be very, very, very hard. And there are going to be important things on the other end of that hard struggle that you'll have to deem whether they are important enough to get through it. And then comes what should be the easy part, but becomes the real hard part in figuring out how to make your own way across. Because there will be a map to get across, but these will be cases where the maps don't work. The maps are outdated, the information is wrong, there's some sort of detour obstacle that's popped in a way that's not going to work for the direction you have. You're going to have to navigate the course yourself, using instincts, using your abilities, using your own thoughts and your own different sorts of ways to make things happen. And you're not going to necessarily get it right, but you'll probably get it anyway. Right is sort of a nebulous term based on what some other people think. There are things where there are right ways and right answers, and there are things where there are the answer that you have to give and the way that you figured out to get it done. Life isn't necessarily a test that gets graded. If it is, it's graded on an extreme curve. But the way past the thing in your way is the way you figure out to get past it. Not the way your parents taught you, not the way your teachers taught you, not the way your mentors taught you, and not the way your friends are actively going. You may all be trying to get to the same general spot, or maybe the same exact spot, but no one can take the same exact path. Everyone has some sort of detour, some sort of deviation, some difference between how they got there and how everyone else got there. And that's what you have to come to terms with. It's not faking it till you make it. It's not any type of subterfuge. It literally is trying to get your way from one spot to the next and just working, playing by ear. Moving forward and moving more or less forward in the direction you're trying to get to. And when you have to shuffle backwards, find some way to get your true north and get your bearings back and go back in that direction and get back on point. The app description is airplanes when they go into the air and they're on autopilot flying towards their destination. They don't fly in a straight line to their spot. And most times they're off course, maybe 80% of the time. I don't know the exact number. But they're not flying in a straight line towards that spot. They're just flying in that general direction and course correcting every minute or so they're staying in the right direction. And then when they get close to their destination, the pilots take over, they navigate directly, and they target their spot to the airport, talk with the tower, and get done. You are the pilot. Your plane is your life. A lot of it will be on autopilot, but at the right times, you'll take your controls and take over. You just have to figure out when the right times are and when to make that approach towards a landing. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. We've put a lot of extra effort into other products, other podcasts. So I want to do a quick mea culpa apology for not being as full and as able for this one lately. We are getting it out there, we are getting it done, but we've had some other milestones pop up in some that ironically were timed where we had to put some effort into them and not as much into this one as normal, even though this one is essentially my longest running podcast that's still live. So apologies for not putting as much effort into this one as have been lately, but it is with good measure. If you listen to the sister podcast to this podcast, Steps to Your Better You, it is about to reach a milestone of 150 episodes, and this time they've been uninterrupted. I've not missed a week of these episodes, unlike this podcast, which actually, went away for 4 years, came back and changed its name. So that's there. We also put a little extra effort, a little extra pizzazz into the Conversations podcast at thisisconversation.com, the weekly wrap-up show, as we're trying to expand the reach on that one, trying to grow in that case. Not an excuse, but it's what happened. So putting a bit of extra focus into this one now that we've reached that milestone, or about to reach a milestone for those other two. We are glad about that, but we're going to put some focus back into this one as the original because, you love all your babies and sometimes your babies get neglected. So, that being said, you can find more information about this podcast, which of course gives you a life lesson in 10 minutes flat, or the sister podcast, which is Steps to Your Better You. That is only 90 seconds, so even quicker. You can find information on all those podcasts, both those podcasts, plus weekly articles at yourbetteryou.info. If you want to find more information about me, check out my main website, jclevelandpayne.net, or email me directly at jclevelandpayne@gmail.com. You can email this show or Your Better You at yourbetteryouinfo@gmail.com. Of course, we love each and every one of you who are a subscriber or just listener in general, but we want to make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss out on the episodes, and share the podcast with friends and family and people who are like-minded. People always say, like, love, and, comment and review. Those are great. Comments, reviews, and feedbacks are awesome. But what we really need to help grow the podcast is for you to tell people about the podcast. That's how we actually get grown and found. It's from people telling other people, this is a great podcast. So tell other people directly so that we can have more people in the crowd, in the group, and we'll have more great things coming up. I promise you, we're going to have a lot of plans ahead for this podcast and Your Better You in general. We just need a few more numbers. So help us grab a few more folks and we can make this thing happen. Once again, thank you so much for just being here for this podcast this week. Like I said, subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode, and be here next week where we do another great episode, another 10-minute life lesson in just 10 minutes. You can take it away here on the 10-Minute Life Lesson podcast from yourbetteryou.info.